Good day, everybody. And in this lecture, we're going to talk about access control. We are in Information Systems 822. That's the course. And this is the second lecture. In our first lecture, we introduced the course of Information Systems Security, and so that Information Systems Security is there to protect all information systems, which include PCs, softwares, applications, and all other entities that are there to manage information. And in this lecture, we want to talk about access control. Access, it's like we are trying to control who would access some information systems. But before we go far, let's go through the outline. We'll look at the definition and we'll have a brief introduction. And then we'll see the four-part access control, and then types of access controls, and then effects of breaches in access control, threats to access control, and then effects of access control and centralized and decentralized access control. And then finally, and most importantly, I would say for this course, for this lecture, is formal models of access control. Access control or controls are terms that we would need to understand well. Access control, these are methods used to restrict and allow access to certain items. So that's just a generic introduction to what access control might mean. And we in information systems security, we also borrow that. We say that these are processes that are used to protect a resource. And you see, in information systems security, a resource or an asset might mean a lot. It might mean a PC, an application, or even an entity that is used in managing information for an organization. So access control can also mean mitigations or put in place to protect a resource from a threat. Last time we talked about threats. And then we would also finally define this as access controls being tools to make sure that only allowed users can access a resource. So if you want to say access control, you can talk about the restrictions. But at some point, you might also want to think as access controls as tools that are utilized to allow only the required people to access a resource. So in all these, we will need some policy, and that's why they say that access control policy are a set of rules that allow a group of people to perform some particular actions on some resources while blocking or avoiding other unauthorized people from accessing these resources. So these policies are very important because they control resource and they also avoid us losing or getting our information to be compromised, or our resources to be compromised. Now, access control generally will protect resources from unauthorized use, and then businesses and organizations would use access controls to manage what employees can do and cannot do, can access, cannot access, or can perform or cannot perform. And these controls, they would define who, for example, people and computer processes are, and what they can do, and how far they can perform some operations. So access controls are several control systems, or use several control systems to achieve this goal. So it can be either a password or a hardware token or some certificates or some biometrics and many other things. So these are a part of these access control systems that are being used. And for example, we have this term authentication. Uh, for you maybe to try to access something, the system must authenticate that you are the right person to access the system. So authentication answers the question, are users who they say they are? So authentication proves that the subject requesting access is the same subject who has been granted access. So we have to be authenticated if we are the rightful users of that system. Now there is a four-part access control here, which is very important. So any access control has to have these aspects in it. The first aspect is identification, second is authentication, third is authorization, and fourth is accountability. Identification asks this question: who is asking to access this asset? So somebody has to be identified. So who is it? And then authentication, can the requester identity be verified? Who is it? And is he part of us? Can we allow him or give him the go ahead? And then what authorization is, what exactly can the requester access and what can they do? Have you been given the authority to perform some action on the resource? That is authorization. And then accountability is like, can we trace you? That is the four-part access control. It's very important for us to have all these aspects whenever a policy or a control is being put in place. They are very crucial. Now, we have types of access controls. We have physical access control and we have the logical access control. Now, physical means access to physical resources. It can be either a protected area or an important room, which you must either use a card or some biometric or some key in order to gain access. I can think of it as a computer server. If it's a computer server, then you wouldn't want anybody to get into it. So you might have restrictions, only the right people to go there, or a database or something. So, and that is an information security aspect. So physical access controls and logical access. Now, when we talk about either access to computer systems or networks, and in this case, you would need things like passwords, usernames, etc. So both aspects are very important because we are information systems security. So people are assets, information assets, PCs, applications, pens, books, all other entities that are used to store and manage information systems. We can apply either a physical access control or a logical access control. Now, in the event there's a breach in access or there's failure to control access, then people would gain advantage over us. And that's why we are saying that these are the losses that might occur when there is a breach in access control. One, there will be disclosure of private information, which is a very sensitive matter. Every information is supposed to be known by the people who are supposed to know it. So privacy is a very key issue. Number two, data might be corrupted, loss of business intelligence, and then there's danger to facilities, staffs, and systems, because anything can be done, and then computer can be damaged. We can have a failure of a system or a business process, or anything can happen whenever we have a breach in access control. So we would want to be sure that we have the right people access the information. Now, threats now to this access control can be compromised in several ways. So a threat is something that, of course, would prove to be a probable source of problem. It's a threat. So we need to know that access control can be compromised in very many ways, which include, for example, gaining physical access. I'm just trying to think. People are coming to organization, maybe they want some information. Sometimes them physically coming into the server room, for example, is a breach to access control. So gaining physical access is not really good to people who are not supposed to gain. And then we have eavesdropping by observation, bypassing security, exploiting hardware and software, reusing or discarding media, and then intercepting communication. There are so many threats. But the very first one, know that gaining physical access is one of it. Number two, intercepting or reusing something that has already been discarded, or exploiting hardware or software. There are so many threats. So this means that our systems need to be very secure. See, many people build up systems which are not very secure, which have got holes or weak points, and people take advantage of that to access systems, and that is a threat, and it's big risk to an organization. So as we've said, the effects are very many, and for an organization, for example, you can lose customer confidence. People wouldn't want to associate yourself with them. So at some point, I remember big companies in the US, they were not having good security mechanisms on their systems, and people's information were utilized by other companies, and it was a privacy issue. So people lost confidence with that company, and it's very likely that people will walk away, and that is going to be a loss of business opportunity, or close down, or a collapse of an organization, bad publicity, and then financial penalties are going to be there, fines are going to be given to such an organization, etc. So security is very important, and the effects are many. Now, it's possible for us to have things centrally managed or distributed, and that's what we can call as a centralized access control. This is whereby access control approach is restricted or given to a single community or entity, either an individual or a department or a device, so that this individual or device or entity is the one that would be in charge, give rights, give control to people. So by so it is easy to manage a big organization. So, and it's easy to trust information because it's only one person who is controlling that. Now, on the other hand, we have before we go to the other side, we still have got servers that are utilized to do what? To ensure that a centralized authentication service is enforced, and these servers are known to use this AAA keywords, authentication, authorization, and accounting, something close to that, and I think we've seen that. On the other hand, I was trying to talk about the centralized access control, which again, on the other hand, is not really good because things are localized and access is granted to several people or departments, and at some point it's easy for us to compromise on the information that we already have. That's why sometimes decentralized access can sometimes result in confusion, or some people might allow people who are not supposed to be allowed into a system. So that might create gaps in the control design. So those are some of the things we need to look into. Finally, and most importantly for this course, for this lecture, is this: in any organization, we must have models of access control. You need to know your organization, and you need to really understand what model you're supposed to have for your organization. So access control models are an invaluable method of gatekeeping for organizations of all sizes and backgrounds. To accommodate organizations of all kinds, there are several different types of access control models that can be configured to each organization's unique needs. The first one is discretionary access control, or DAC. This is the least restrictive because it's like everybody is given permission to do whatever they want. So it's like it's your own discretion. So we have it not very secure. It's a risky situation because everybody would give anybody authority to do anything. So the owner of the resource decides who gets in and changes permissions as needed, which is a very risky thing. So that is discretionary control. Number two is mandatory access control. This is the most restrictive and secure, and it is what some of the companies use because you must adhere to a system that is put in place, and you're not in charge, but then there is an administrator who is going to classify you and then give you rights based on your cluster. So that is very important. Another one which is also very important is known as non-discretionary access control. In some other books or sites, it is known as a role-based role. What role do you play? And based on your role in an organization, you are given rights. If you are in the finance section, there's an example, you're given all the roles that pertains to finance matters. If you are, for example, an HR, you get roles that are pertains to HR. If you're a lecturer or a tutor or a professor, then you get only roles that are relevant to you as a professor. So it means that you might not be able to access or have ability to see other things or manipulate other things. So it is restrictive in its own way, which is good, though sometimes it's a disadvantage to people who might want to either try one or two things across their roles. That is very important. So that is non-discretionary access control. And then the last one is the rule-based access control. So what happens is that a list of rules are put in place and they are used for accessing. A good example is that some rules can apply, for example, to a student, that these students, if they are in campus, then they are able to access these resources and they're able to perform these things or execute these entities. So it means that if you are outside the campus, then you are restricted. So that means that the rules apply for people who are within a particular region, And maybe if you're outside that region, some other rules are there, maybe you're only able to observe. So these rules are dynamic, and this means that it's very flexible. They can be manipulated and changed to fit a certain scenario, which is very good. A good example is that sometimes we might want to find out who is this, when was the last time they accessed this, what was the action, how many access attempts have been done. So based on these rules, some access control mechanism is put in place. So rules are very important. So these four models are key to access control, and it's good for you to dive deep and get to understand them in details. Otherwise, thank you.